What if everything you believed about warfare was wrong? What if the most devastating shot in military history wasn't fired by a seasoned veteran, but by someone the entire army tried to silence? In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where death lurks behind every rock and survival depends on split-second decisions, one person was about to prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't the gun, it's the determination to never give up. This is the true story of how sabotage, prejudice, and a broken rifle led to the most impossible shot ever recorded, changing military history forever. The target was over 6,000 meters away. The weapon was deliberately damaged. The odds were impossible. But what happened next would leave even the most experienced soldiers speechless and rewrite the rules of what's possible on the battlefield. The dust swirled around the remote outpost like a living thing, carrying with it the smell of diesel fuel and tension that had been building for weeks. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos stepped out of the transport vehicle, her boots hitting the rocky ground with a confidence that immediately drew stares from the soldiers already stationed there. At 28, she had already broken more records than most snipers achieved in entire careers, but none of that seemed to matter to the men watching her arrival with skeptical eyes. The forward operating base sat perched on a mountainside in eastern Afghanistan. A collection of reinforced structures that looked more like a hastily built fortress than a military installation. It was here that some of the most challenging long-range operations were conducted, where the enemy knew every rock and shadow, and where one mistake could mean death for an entire unit. Maria had been sent here specifically because of her reputation, but she quickly realized that reputation meant very little when you were the first woman sniper assigned to this particular unit. Captain David Richardson emerged from the command tent, his weathered face showing years of combat experience and a skepticism that had kept him alive through 3 deployments. He looked Maria up and down with the calculating gaze of someone trying to solve a problem he never wanted to face. The intelligence reports on her were impressive: 37 confirmed kills, expert marksmanship ratings, and a track record that would make any commander proud. But this was his unit, his responsibility, and he had serious doubts about integrating a female sniper into an operation where teamwork could mean the difference between life and death. The other members of the sniper team were equally wary. Sergeant First Class Jake Morrison had been the team's primary sniper for 2 years, and his pride was as sharp as his shooting skills. He watched Maria unpack her gear with the kind of attention usually reserved for defusing explosives. Corporal Tommy Chen, the spotter, kept glancing between his longtime partner and the newcomer, sensing the tension that was already building like a storm on the horizon. Maria understood the dynamics immediately. She had faced this kind of reception before, though never in a combat zone where the stakes were so high. She focused on her equipment, carefully checking each piece with the methodical precision that had earned her respect at previous assignments. Her rifle was a custom M24, modified specifically for long-range precision shooting. She had worked with the same weapon for 3 years, knowing its quirks and capabilities better than she knew her own heartbeat. The first few days passed in a series of tests disguised as routine operations. Maria was assigned to observation duties while Jake took the primary shooting positions. She watched through her scope as he made shots that were impressive but not extraordinary, noting wind patterns and terrain features that would become crucial information later. The enemy activity in the area was increasing, with reports of a high-value target moving through the region, someone important enough that multiple units were being repositioned to intercept. During her off-duty hours, Maria discovered that her reputation had preceded her in ways she hadn't expected. Some soldiers respected her achievements, while others viewed her presence as a publicity stunt that put real soldiers at risk. The conversation stopped when she entered rooms, and she often found herself eating alone or sitting by herself during briefings. The isolation was familiar, but it stung differently here where life-and-death decisions were made every day. Jake Morrison was particularly vocal about his concerns, though he was careful to phrase them in terms of unit cohesion and tactical effectiveness. He had been the unit's top performer, and Maria's arrival felt like a direct challenge to his position. During range practice, he made comments about the physical demands of carrying heavy equipment through mountain terrain, questioning whether someone of Maria's size could handle the rigorous requirements of their missions. Maria responded the only way she knew how, through performance. She outshot Jake in 3 consecutive training sessions, displaying a consistency and accuracy that even the most skeptical soldiers couldn't ignore. Her knowledge of ballistics and environmental factors impressed Captain Richardson, who began to see that her assignment might not be the political gesture he had initially assumed. She could calculate wind drift and bullet drop in her head, faster than most soldiers could work it out with computers. The breakthrough came during a night observation mission. Maria was paired with Jake to monitor a valley where insurgent activity had been reported. They had been in position for 6 hours when she spotted movement that Jake had missed. A convoy of vehicles moving without lights along a road that intelligence reports said should be empty. Her ability to distinguish between civilian and military movement patterns in low-light conditions provided crucial information that led to the interdiction of a major weapons shipment. Captain Richardson began assigning Maria to more significant operations, though always as a secondary shooter or observer. The arrangement frustrated her because she knew her capabilities exceeded what she was being asked to do, but she also understood the delicate politics of proving herself in a unit where acceptance had to be earned through sustained performance. Every shot, every observation, every tactical decision was being evaluated, not just for its immediate effectiveness, but for what it said about her ability to function under pressure. The tension in the unit reached a critical point when intelligence reports indicated that the high-value target they had been tracking was planning to move through their area of operations. This was the kind of mission that defined careers. A single shot at an enemy leader who had been responsible for coordinating attacks that killed dozens of coalition soldiers. The shot would be challenging, requiring skills that pushed the limits of what was technically possible with their equipment. Jake Morrison assumed he would be the primary shooter, and his confidence was bolstered by the support of several other team members who believed his experience in the region gave him advantages that Maria couldn't match. They knew the terrain, understood the local conditions, and had worked together long enough to anticipate each other's movements and decisions. Maria was still the outsider, talented but unproven in the specific challenges of their operational environment. The mission briefing was scheduled for the following morning, and Maria spent the evening cleaning her rifle and reviewing topographical maps of the area where the operation would take place. She studied wind patterns, elevation changes, and potential shooting positions with the intensity of someone preparing for a final exam. The M24 had been her constant companion through multiple deployments, and she trusted its accuracy more than she trusted the opinions of the soldiers around her. What she didn't know was that some members of the unit had already decided she wouldn't get the chance to prove herself. They viewed her assignment as a dangerous experiment that put their mission and their lives at risk. The conversation that took place in Jake Morrison's quarters that night would have consequences that none of them anticipated, setting in motion a chain of events that would test not only Maria's shooting skills, but her ability to overcome obstacles that went far beyond enemy fire. The morning sun rose over the mountains with a clarity that promised perfect visibility for long-range shooting. Maria felt the familiar pre-mission tension that came with knowing that everything she had trained for was about to be put to the ultimate test. She had no idea that her rifle had been tampered with during the night, or that the mission she was about to undertake would require her to overcome sabotage as well as enemy resistance. Captain Richardson called the team together for final preparations, unaware that the unity of his unit had been compromised by prejudice and jealousy. The target was confirmed to be moving along a route that would bring him within range of their position, but the shot would be at the extreme limits of their equipment's capabilities. It was the kind of challenge that separated exceptional snipers from merely good ones, and everyone knew that success or failure would be measured in millimeters at a distance where such precision seemed impossible. Maria checked her equipment one final time, noting the weight and balance of her rifle, without realizing that critical adjustments had been made to sabotage her performance. The other soldiers watched her preparations with expressions that ranged from professional interest to barely concealed hostility. The mission was about to begin, and none of them could predict how dramatically it would change their understanding of what was possible, when determination met opportunity at exactly the right moment. The mission began before dawn, with the team moving through rocky terrain toward their designated shooting position. Maria carried her rifle and equipment with the same careful attention she had maintained throughout her military career, unaware that the weapon she trusted with her life had been deliberately compromised. The sabotage had been subtle but devastating. Critical screws loosened, scope alignment shifted just enough to throw off accuracy, and the bipod legs adjusted to create instability that would make precision shooting nearly impossible. Jake Morrison led the team along a path he had used multiple times before, his confidence evident in the way he navigated the treacherous mountain terrain. Behind him, Maria maintained the steady pace that had carried her through countless missions, her mind focused on the technical challenges that lay ahead. The intelligence reports indicated their target would be traveling in a convoy that should pass through a valley approximately 4,800 meters from their planned position, already at the extreme range of their equipment, but within the realm of possibility for a sniper of her caliber. The shooting position was a natural rock formation that provided excellent concealment while offering clear lines of sight across the valley below. Captain Richardson had chosen it specifically because it gave them multiple angles of approach and several escape routes if the mission went wrong. The team set up their equipment as the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist and revealing the vast expanse of terrain they would need to monitor. Maria began her pre-shot routine. the systematic process of checking every component that could affect accuracy over such an extreme distance. It was during this process that she first noticed something was wrong. The scope felt different when she shouldered the rifle, and the sight picture wasn't aligning correctly with her expectations. Years of experience with the same weapon had given her an intuitive understanding of how it should feel, and something was definitely off. She began a more detailed inspection, checking each component methodically. The bipod legs were uneven, creating a wobble that would make precise aiming impossible. The scope mounts had been loosened just enough to allow movement under recoil, which would throw off follow-up shots and make it difficult to maintain consistent point of impact. Most critically, several action screws had been backed out, creating potential for the entire weapon system to come apart under the stress of firing. The discovery hit Maria like a physical blow. Someone had deliberately sabotaged her rifle, knowing that such tampering in a combat situation could cost lives. The realization that members of her own unit would risk mission failure and potentially endanger everyone's safety just to prevent her from succeeding was almost too devastating to process. She looked around at the other soldiers, trying to determine who might be responsible, while maintaining the professional composure that the situation demanded. Jake Morrison was setting up his own rifle about 50 meters away, his movements confident and practiced. He glanced over at Maria occasionally, and she thought she detected something in his expression. Not quite satisfaction, but a look of someone who expected to be proven right about something. Corporal Chen was monitoring radio communications while two other team members maintained security watch. Any of them could have had access to her weapon during the night. Captain Richardson noticed that Maria wasn't setting up her rifle and approached to investigate. His combat experience had taught him to recognize when something was seriously wrong, and the tension in Maria's posture indicated a problem that went beyond normal pre-mission nerves. When she explained what she had discovered, his expression shifted from concern to anger. Sabotage within a unit was not just a disciplinary matter, it was a betrayal that could get people killed. The captain's first instinct was to abort the mission and conduct a full investigation, but the intelligence window was closing rapidly. Their target was already in movement, and repositioning for another attempt might not be possible for weeks or months. The high-value nature of the target made the mission too important to cancel based on equipment problems, even if those problems were the result of deliberate sabotage. Maria made a decision that would define the rest of her military career. Instead of accepting defeat or waiting for replacement equipment, she announced her intention to repair the rifle and complete the mission. The other soldiers watched with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright disbelief. As she began working on the weapon with tools from her field repair kit, fixing the sabotage under field conditions would require skills that went far beyond normal operator maintenance, and doing it under time pressure while preparing for one of the most challenging shots of her career seemed impossible. Working with steady hands despite the adrenaline coursing through her system, Maria began addressing each problem systematically. She retightened the action screws to proper torque specifications using a portable torque wrench she carried for field maintenance. The scope mounts required careful adjustment to restore proper alignment, a process that normally would be done on a shooting range with multiple test shots to verify accuracy. The bipod legs needed complete disassembly and reassembly to correct the deliberate misalignment that had been introduced. Jake Morrison watched her work with growing unease. The sabotage had been his idea, supported by two other team members who believed Maria's presence was a dangerous distraction from their mission effectiveness. They had convinced themselves that preventing her from taking the shot was actually protecting the unit, that her inevitable failure would demonstrate why women didn't belong in combat sniper roles. Seeing her methodically repair each problem they had created forced him to confront the possibility that his actions might have been motivated by prejudice rather than genuine concern for mission success. As Maria worked on her rifle, radio reports indicated that the target convoy was approaching the projected intercept point ahead of schedule. The time pressure was building, and Captain Richardson had to make difficult decisions about positioning and backup plans. Jake Morrison's rifle was ready, and he was certainly capable of making the shot. But the captain found himself wanting to give Maria the opportunity to prove herself after what had been done to her. The repair work took nearly 2 hours, time that felt like days. While enemy movement reports continued to come in over the radio, Maria's hands remained steady throughout the process. Her mind focused on the technical requirements, while pushing aside thoughts about who had betrayed her and why. She had faced obstacles throughout her military career, but none had been quite as personal or potentially deadly as deliberate sabotage from her own team members. When the rifle repairs were finally complete, Maria needed to verify that the weapon was functioning correctly. Under normal circumstances, this would involve test firing at various ranges to confirm that scope alignment and mechanical function were restored. In their current situation, with the target already approaching and the need for stealth paramount, she would have to trust her mechanical skills and hope that everything was working correctly when she needed it most. The valley below remained quiet except for the distant sound of vehicles that intelligence reports suggested might be their target convoy. Through her newly aligned scope, Maria could see the road where the vehicles should appear, a narrow ribbon of dirt that wound through the mountainous terrain like a snake. At over 6,000 meters away, individual vehicles would appear as tiny dots, making target identification and precise shot placement extraordinarily difficult, even under perfect conditions. Jake Morrison found himself in an impossible position. Part of him hoped that Maria would succeed, proving that his sabotage had been wrong and motivated by prejudice he was ashamed to acknowledge. Another part of him feared that her success would expose his actions and destroy his military career. The internal conflict was visible in his expression as he watched her make final adjustments to equipment he had tried to destroy. Captain Richardson received confirmation that the high-value target was in the approaching convoy, traveling in an armored vehicle that would require precise shot placement to penetrate. The distance involved meant that environmental factors like wind drift and atmospheric conditions would have enormous impact on bullet trajectory. Even with perfect equipment and ideal conditions, the shot would be at the very limits of what was technically possible. Maria completed her equipment check and signaled her readiness to Captain Richardson. Her rifle was as accurate as she could make it under field conditions, but there was no way to know for certain until she fired the shot that mattered. Years of training and experience had prepared her for this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for doing it with a weapon that had been deliberately sabotaged by members of her own unit. The convoy appeared on the horizon as a distant dust cloud, moving along the expected route but still too far away for positive target identification. Maria settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing and heart rate with the discipline that had been drilled into her through countless hours of training. The shot she was about to attempt would be one of the longest successful engagements in military history, but first she had to overcome the obstacles that her own teammates had placed in her path. Through her scope, she could see the lead vehicle beginning to take shape as more than just a moving dot. The range was still enormous, but within the theoretical capability of her equipment if everything worked perfectly, she began her wind reading process, using techniques that combined scientific calculation with intuitive understanding developed through years of long-range shooting. The margin for error was essentially zero, and she would only get one chance to prove that determination and skill could overcome sabotage and prejudice. The moment of truth was approaching rapidly, and everyone on the team understood that what happened next would change their understanding of what was possible when exceptional skill met impossible circumstances. Maria's finger moved to the trigger as she prepared to take the shot that would either vindicate her place on the team or prove that the sabotage had succeeded in its goal of preventing her from demonstrating her true capabilities. The convoy materialized through the heat shimmer like a mirage becoming reality. 3 vehicles moving in tactical formation along the mountain road that intelligence had predicted they would use. Through her scope, Maria could make out details that confirmed these were not civilian vehicles. The spacing, the speed, and the obvious security protocols all matched the profile for a high-value target movement. At 6,247 meters away, according to her laser rangefinder, the vehicles appeared as small dark shapes against the dusty landscape. Captain Richardson's voice crackled through her earpiece, confirming target identification and giving her authorization to engage. The middle vehicle in the convoy was armored, its reinforced construction visible even at extreme range. Intelligence reports indicated that their primary target would be traveling in that vehicle, protected by bulletproof glass and steel plating that would require precise shot placement to penetrate. The technical challenge was staggering, hitting a moving target at over 6 kilometers with a rifle that had been sabotaged just hours earlier. Maria began her final calculations, factoring in wind speed, atmospheric pressure, temperature, and the dozens of other variables that affected bullet trajectory over such extreme distances. The wind was variable, shifting between 8 and 12 miles per hour from the northwest, which would push her bullet significantly off course if not properly compensated. At the distance involved, a wind miscalculation of just 2 miles per hour could result in a complete miss by several meters. Her breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that had become second nature through years of precision shooting. Each breath was measured, each heartbeat monitored as she waited for the natural pause between cardiac cycles that would provide the steadiest possible shooting platform. The rifle felt solid in her hands now, the repairs holding under the stress of her grip and the awkward shooting position required by the terrain. Jake Morrison watched through his own scope, torn between hoping for a success and fearing the consequences of his sabotage being overcome. His rifle was ready as backup, but everyone on the team understood that this shot belonged to Maria. She had earned the right to attempt it through her response to the sabotage, demonstrating a level of technical knowledge and mental toughness that even her harshest critics had to respect. His finger rested near his trigger, ready to take a follow-up shot if needed, but knowing that the extreme range made rapid follow-up nearly impossible. The convoy maintained its steady pace, following the road that would keep it in Maria's sight picture for approximately 90 seconds before terrain features blocked further observation. She had time for perhaps 2 shots maximum, and the first would be her best opportunity as the vehicles moved through the most open section of the valley. The pressure was enormous, but she had trained for pressure situations throughout her career. Through her scope, Maria watched the lead vehicle navigate a slight curve in the road, followed by the armored transport carrying their primary target. The third vehicle maintained its trailing security position, its occupants undoubtedly scanning the surrounding mountains for threats they couldn't possibly see at such distance. None of them knew that death was watching from over 6 kilometers away, calculating angles and trajectories with mechanical precision. Maria made her final wind adjustment, moving her point of aim to compensate for the environmental factors that would affect her bullet's flight path. The mathematics involved were complex, but years of experience had given her an intuitive understanding that supplemented the scientific calculations. She could feel the conditions in ways that went beyond mere measurement, sensing variations in air density and wind patterns that instruments couldn't detect. The crosshairs settled on a point approximately 4 meters ahead of the armored vehicle, leading the target to account for its movement during the bullet's flight time. At the distance involved, her projectile would take nearly 8 seconds to reach the target, meaning she had to predict exactly where the vehicle would be when the bullet arrived. The margin for error was measured in inches over a distance where most people couldn't even see the target clearly. Captain Richardson held his breath as he watched through binoculars, understanding that he was about to witness either one of the most spectacular failures in sniper history or a shot that would redefine what was considered possible. The entire team was focused on Maria's position, the tension so thick it seemed to press down on them like a physical weight. Even the radio chatter from other units seemed to fade away as everyone concentrated on the impossible shot about to be attempted. Maria's trigger finger applied steady pressure, feeling for the precise breakpoint of her rifle's mechanism. The weapon had been her constant companion through multiple deployments, and despite the sabotage and repairs, it felt familiar in her hands. Years of muscle memory guided her movements as she entered the zone of absolute concentration that separated exceptional snipers from merely good ones. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed off the surrounding mountains, the sound seeming insignificant compared to the enormity of what had just been attempted. Maria maintained her sight picture through the recoil, watching through her scope as the bullet began its journey across the vast expanse of terrain that separated her from the target. At such extreme range, she wouldn't see the impact for several seconds, creating a suspension of time that felt like an eternity. Jake Morrison watched through his own scope, tracking the convoy's movement and ready to take a follow-up shot if Maria's attempt failed. The vehicles continued their steady progress along the mountain road, their occupants unaware that a projectile was racing toward them at over twice the speed of sound. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness as everyone waited to see the result of Maria's impossible attempt. The bullet struck the armored vehicle with devastating precision, penetrating the passenger compartment through a gap in the armor protection that most snipers would never have been able to identify, much less hit at such range. The vehicle swerved violently off the road, rolling down a steep embankment in a cloud of dust and debris. The convoy immediately went into defensive mode, but their primary target had already been neutralized by a shot that defied every conventional understanding of what was possible with small arms fire. Captain Richardson's voice exploded over the radio as he confirmed the hit, his professional composure cracking with the excitement of witnessing something that would be discussed in military circles for decades to come. Intelligence reports would later confirm that the high-value target had been eliminated, dealing a significant blow to enemy operations in the region. But the immediate impact was on the soldiers who had witnessed Maria's impossible shot. Jake Morrison lowered his rifle with a mixture of awe and shame, finally understanding the magnitude of what his sabotage could have cost them. He had tried to prevent a fellow soldier from proving herself, and in doing so had nearly denied his unit one of the most significant tactical victories of their deployment. The prejudice that had motivated his actions seemed petty and destructive when measured against Maria's response to his betrayal. The team began preparing for immediate extraction, knowing that the shot would bring enemy forces searching for their position. Maria disassembled her rifle with the same methodical precision she had used to repair it, her movements showing no trace of the excitement that everyone else was feeling. For her, the shot had been the culmination of years of training and preparation, remarkable more for overcoming the sabotage than for the extreme range involved. During the helicopter extraction that followed, Captain Richardson sat next to Maria and spoke words that would stay with her for the rest of her military career. He told her that what she had accomplished went beyond marksmanship, beyond technical skill, and into the realm of character that defined the best soldiers he had ever served with. She had taken the worst that prejudice and sabotage could throw at her and responded with professionalism that proved her worth beyond any doubt. The official report of the mission would record the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history, but it would also note the exceptional circumstances that surrounded the shot. Maria's ability to repair sabotaged equipment under field conditions and then execute a precision engagement at extreme range became a case study that was taught in military academies around the world. Her story demonstrated that technical excellence combined with unshakable determination could overcome obstacles that seemed impossible to surmount. Jake Morrison requested a private meeting with Maria before she was transferred to her next assignment. The conversation was brief but significant, with him acknowledging his actions and accepting full responsibility for the sabotage that could have cost lives. Maria's response was characteristically professional, focusing on lessons learned rather than personal recrimination. She understood that proving herself meant more than just making difficult shots. It meant maintaining her integrity even when others abandoned theirs. The impact of Maria's achievement extended far beyond their small unit in the mountains of Afghanistan. Military leadership began re-evaluating policies and attitudes that had prevented talented soldiers from reaching their full potential. Her story became proof that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources when artificial barriers were removed and people were judged solely on their capabilities and character. Years later, when Maria had retired from active duty and was training the next generation of precision shooters, she would tell her students that the most important shot she ever made wasn't remarkable because of its distance or technical difficulty. It was remarkable because it proved that determination and skill could overcome sabotage, prejudice, and impossible circumstances when someone refused to accept defeat as an option. The rifle that had been sabotaged and repaired under combat conditions was eventually retired to a military museum, where it serves as a reminder of what can be accomplished when exceptional skill meets unshakable resolve. The display includes the full story of the mission, including the sabotage that Maria overcame, serving as both inspiration and warning to future generations of soldiers. Captain Richardson's final report on the mission concluded with words that perfectly captured what everyone had witnessed that day. Staff Sergeant Santos didn't just make an impossible shot. She proved that the most dangerous weapon on any battlefield isn't technology or tactics. It's the refusal to accept limitations imposed by others who doubt what you're capable of achieving. That lesson echoed through military training programs and inspired countless soldiers who faced their own battles against doubt, prejudice, and seemingly impossible circumstances.
The story of the
247-meter shot became legend, that those who were there understood that the real victory had nothing to do with distance or marksmanship records. It had everything to do with character, determination, and the power of proving that excellence recognizes no artificial boundaries when someone has the skill and courage to reach beyond what others think is possible.